All right, we're back. It is Wednesday again, and it is National Adoption Awareness Month. I think that's how you say it, right, Jan?
Yes.
Okay, so Jan here, and actually today is our 42nd birthday at Gateway, which is very exciting. And it's people, as we like to call Gateway lifers of Jan. How long have you been at Gateway Woods, Jan?
This year will be 25 years.
25 years. Wow, a quarter of a century. That is impressive. So yeah, just go back, kind of what initially brought you to Gateway Woods 25 years ago.
Okay, yeah, I had different positions, so it wasn't all one position. And what brought me to Gateway Woods is in 1991, we did a trip to Haiti. My husband, Bill, was on the well drilling through World Relief. He was on that committee, and we spent a month with our family in Haiti. And we just got back. That was in March, and we just got back, and I was unpacking, trying to adjust back to America and all of that. And my husband was reading The Silver Lining. He had been on Gateway Woods board, so he's familiar with it. But he was reading The Silver Lining, and he said, I think we ought to consider being house parents. And I was not prepared at all. I was just unpacking, and I said, I have worked with these kids, but I will not live with them. That was my first comment.
So where were you living at this point?
We were living close to Bern, Indiana, out in the country, going to Bluffton Country Church. But then in the next months, of course, I prayed about it, and God kind of turned me totally around. So we started house parenting that. We applied in late May, and we started house parenting in August, the week after the auction.
Okay, so, and how long were you guys house parents?
It was a little over 2 years.
Okay, and then, what happened after? Did you leave Gateway completely?
Yeah, I left the Gateway completely. Before I came to Gateway, I had done lots of social work positions, and I was a CASA director, which is a court advocate program for abused and neglected kids, and I was director of that program, so I went back to that. And then I was also did some home-based work from Adams and Wells County. But then, a few years later, Ruth Reinhardt, who had the foster care position, called me and asked me if I would work there. And at first I said no, because I felt like there was only one child in foster care and a few foster parents, and I didn't feel like they needed me. But then she called and said she was quitting, and so then I took her position. That was in like 96.
Okay.
And then, then in 2001, I was working in foster care, and I got a call from adoptive parents. Well, it was Jay and Rhonda Groove, who attend Bluffton Country Church, and they said, we're adopting from the Ukraine. Could you do our home study? And I was like, I didn't know. We had never done an international home study, but I checked into it, and we had the credentials. We were a licensed agency. I was a licensed social worker, and so I just started doing it on the side while I was doing foster care. And then in 2003, the board officially opened the adoption program. Okay. And in 2006, I was still doing it on the side though. And then in 2006, I kept getting busier and busier, and I went full time into the adoption program.
Very good. Wow, Jan with the side hustle happening. Okay, so speak a little bit to your kids. So like, were you living in the Leo area then, like after you left house parenting?
Yeah, we stayed in kind of the Leo area. Yep, we did. I kind of went down to Decatur and worked down there, and we stayed in the Leo area during that time. Yeah, like a lot of people around here.
Sure. And your husband Bill, was he working at Gateway too?
Yeah, he worked in the foster care program, and of course he's a house parent. But he also worked for Allen and Adams County. He was a DCS supervisor too during that time. So
very good. As always, if you have questions for Jan, please chime in. So Okay, so we're at 2006. You kind of brought us up to that speed. So, how did the adoption program grow from the early stages, really till now? Like kind of
Okay.
in between.
So yeah, it grew a lot. I don't have this right in front of me, but we probably did. The first year when I was doing it on the side, we might have done like 4 or 5 home studies or whatever. And now we have done over 600 home studies, and we have worked with over 400 kids,
Wow.
some internationally, some domestically. It mainly grew just by word of mouth. A lot of times when we'd work with somebody in their church, they would tell other people in their church, and so we've worked with multiple people that are part of churches all over the Fort Wayne area, and then we've kind of expanded to Indianapolis area and South Bend area and all of that, and then of course we started our Illinois program and expanded to that. I think it was 2014, I think. And so, yeah, it's really grown. A lot by word of mouth of the adoptive parents. And then for birth parents, part of my job is we try to advertise and to let them know that we have our program, because we have all these adoptive parents. We have a waiting list of about 25 adoptive parents. So we send brochures to like crisis pregnancy centers, hospitals. I give presentations sometime, gynecologists' offices, and of course you help me redo our website and have a website where a birth mom can just go directly to our website and find out about our program.
Yeah.
So.
Adoptiongateway.org. So.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's a great tool for not only birth moms but adoptive families to get some information pretty quickly and get the answers to questions, but then also contact us through text, phone, or through a form on the website. So what's your favorite part of your job? I mean, you've been in this a lot of years here.
My favorite part is just working with adoptive parents, working with pregnant women who are placing, just working with them. I do inquiries when people first call and answer their questions, and then I do office interviews, so I get to meet each and every family. Sometimes we have 3 adoption case managers who do the home study work, but sometimes I fill in, and I enjoy that sometimes, and do post placements. So I just enjoy that part of it. It can be very challenging sometimes working with a pregnant woman, but I do enjoy the placement of the baby and working with them and all of that.
Yeah, so working with the people, the relationships, because as the adoption program manager, sometimes you're probably more the manager, and so you're not in that day-to-day relationship building as much, right? So tell us about Beth. Is she a pretty good employee for you?
Well, since you're a little bit related, no, she does an excellent job. We have all 3 of ours are really good. Terry has worked in foster care a lot of years, and so she has a wealth of experience and worked with all kinds of troubled kids for many years. This will be her 20th year with Gateway, and she started out in foster care and then went to adoption. And your family, you've adopted yourself internationally, and so that's great experience. So Beth can speak from direct experience when she works with adopted families. And then we have Shanna, who she has adopted 3 children, 2 domestically and 1 internationally. So she has a lot of direct experience too, besides all their training and social work degrees and all of that. So I feel very blessed with the staff that we have.
That's great. Now, is this unique to have such a big team, or is this through the years? How many workers have you had?
Right now we probably have. We've had, as it grown, we started out with just Terry, and then we grew to 2, and we've grown to 3. So it's been kind of a gradual growth, but yeah.
So from just supporters and kind of people, like what are some biggest needs for the adoption program, whether it's through prayer or financially or just awareness?
Biggest needs, yeah, prayer. We always, there's a lot to pray for in these pregnant women that are placing their child, or internationally. Just there's kids. It's hard because there are. We pray that countries open up. There are thousands, if not millions, of kids that need to be adopted, that are starving or don't have any family, or wandering the streets with no one, health issues they're dying from all over the world. And there's the biggest problem is internationally is not that there's not kids, but the countries, the governments are unstable, especially in Africa, and so some of the adoption programs close or get restricted. And so we pray that those countries will open up, because there's a huge need there. It's just with the country closures of adoption.
Yeah, so with international, is it a lot different than domestic as far as kind of the dealing with the governments and like the red tape, if you will?
Yes, it is a lot different, and it depends on each country is a little different, and each culture that the kids come from. That's a whole different thing to work with that, and working with pregnant women. That's like working with a lot of them come from dysfunctional families, so that's a whole different thing to work with them and help them with services and match them with families and all of that. So yeah, it's different things. Kids are older in international adoption, so there's a lot of issues. We've placed kids up to age 16, so they have lots of issues and cultural and transitions and all of that. And I was going to say that I was prepared for this position. I was a social work degree, and I worked in the field in lots of different positions: home-based worker, CASA director, DCS worker. I was down in Adams County, lots of different positions. The part that prepared me probably the most is living with the kids. So in spite of how I said first about residential,
Sure.
It was one of the most valuable things, because we had 7 teens most of the time in our home, and we had 2 teens of our own, so it was challenging.
Yeah.
9 teens. And then we also fostered a teenage boy, so living directly with him gave me a deep understanding of what the adoptive parents go through and living with these kids. And then culturally, I didn't even know it at the time, but my husband is a real adventurer. He and I grew up in a more secure. We didn't really do a lot of adventuresome things, and
Sure.
so we ended up traveling to. Well, we spent a summer in Europe, and at the end we went to Eastern Europe and visited some of the believers there in Hungary and that. And then 10 years later, in the 80s, we went back there at his pull, and we went to Russia and Eastern Europe. And just those experiences really helped me with international adoption, to understand some of the cultures, some of the fears, some of the persecution. Like when we were traveling to Russia, when you get to the border, they lift up your whole train car, because they do not want to be invaded by rail, so they change the gauge. And when you're up there, the police come in and they go through your whole compartment and all of that. We were not hiding Bibles like some of the people that we traveled with in another train car. They bugged our compartment. We met with believers in Russia in secret. We heard stories of persecution, like the minister there that we talked to was a young minister, and he was given shock treatments because he did not want to become a communist member. And so we had lots of those experiences to understand. And then when we spent a month in Haiti, we saw a lot of poverty, being the poorest country in this hemisphere.
Yeah.
And we were in huts we were there a month with the missionaries, and we went into huts with dirt floors and had people come to our door trying to sell us 2 eggs, and it was just an eye-opening experience for me to see that kind of poverty and to feel in a minority. We went to church with the Haitians, and there were probably 300 Haitians at the church, and we were the only white family there. So I got a little feel of that too.
Yeah.
So those experiences, even though I didn't know it at the time, became invaluable in understanding some of the cultures. So when I get a call I have gotten calls from people from Russia saying the government was giving them all these issues in their adoption, I totally understood.
Yeah.
So
You've got to mention some differences, but maybe explain for somebody who doesn't really know adoption lingo. Could you explain some of the major differences between domestic and international adoption?
Okay, well, in domestic, you get a child born in the United States. It could be, we have people that get it anywhere in the United States, and they're usually newborns, because if a woman decides to parent her child at birth, she usually does not end up giving them up later. Last summer we did have someone that had 4-year-old twins, but that was very unusual. Most of them are newborns. If they don't make that decision,
Is
then
it usually then through foster care because they?
But then, yes, sometimes they do end up getting adopted through foster care later, through abuse and neglect. So that's sort of sad to us, that it would be better if they would have been placed from the very beginning and not have to go through the trauma of abuse and neglect and being removed from their families and all that. And then, of course, international, they come from over 25 different countries, Asian countries. We worked with Latino in Central and South America. We worked with, African countries. We worked with Eastern European countries. So they come from all these different cultures, and usually about 15 months is the youngest. And they, people adopt sibling groups and older kids, and of course different races. They do different races domestically too. We do African American and Hispanic, and in Arizona there's an agency that does a lot of American Indian kids that have that descent. But it is different when they're living in the culture, and they it's a big transition, language, everything. Some of them, it's the first time when you walk into the orphanage, adopted parents, that they've seen a white person. So it's even kind of scary to some of them. It's a big transition, and sometimes they end up with some attachment issues if they've been, like in Russia, they just line up the cribs and the kids just lay there. They don't give much attention. So some of them have a problem knowing how to attach to their parents. So there's lots of those, and then there's medical issues. Some of them have some pretty serious health issues. They've watched their parents die of AIDS, and lots of those kind of issues that you don't have domestically.
Then from the financial side, how does it really compare between international and domestic?
It's usually a little more reasonable domestically, but not always. Some consultant agencies work with various other agencies, and they charge a lot. It kind of depends somewhat on the country, how many trips you have to make, and it can vary. So there is some difference, but it's not as much as people think. But there are a lot of grants available, and when people come to our office, we give them a list of grants, and there's some really neat grants you can get, like Both Hands, that does a program to help widows, and there's just a lot of, if you have the desire to adopt, usually you can work around the finances. If you feel God's led you that way through grants, you get an adoption tax credit that eventually you can get about $15,000 back per child. And some people that adopt sibling groups actually get all of their adoption expenses back through credit, because you get $15,000 per child.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, there is ways, and I tell a lot of people are afraid or hesitant, especially in our culture, to ask people for financial assistance. But we found through the years that people love to donate towards adoption, just because they know the family, they can see the child, watch the child grow up, and have a personal relationship. So a lot of families are very willing to help with finances.
Yeah, no, and I say this a lot, but it's the heart of God, because He obviously adopted us into His family through His Son, and not all of us maybe are called to adopt ourselves, but to be able to raise around the awareness and just support through prayer,
Sure.
and then financially helping somebody. So, that's
And another thing I think is that some of these kids, even in America and in other countries, will never hear about Christ and never really go to church and hear the gospel in their lives if they weren't adopted by a Christian family.
Very well said. Do you have anything else you'd like to add, or do we have any other questions from the field? So,
Okay, no, not really.
well, Jan, I've enjoyed this, and keep praying through this month. We are going to hopefully have a couple more of the adoption staff later this month. I think next week is Chad Cave, so role reversal from last week. I get to interview him now. So join us next Wednesday at 12:30, and have a good week.